They watched. They waited. Now their time has come. Out of the depths of space, the ultimate terror.
All right, we're here. We recorded part of this episode already. There was technical difficulties, mostly. GarageBand decided to be stupid.
More specifically, I recorded some of this episode. It was about 40 minutes of just me talking.
And there's about 5 or 6 minutes with me talking, and then there's nothing. And I don't know why, but I'm keeping my fucking eye on this GarageBand thing now, because I have no idea what on earth could have stopped that shit. But we're here now.
Modern technology is amazing, Diego.
It is. It has all these bells and whistles. I finally figured out how to stop it from trying to connect to my phone when I walk near and away from my computer, which is great. So I don't know what happened here, but anyways, we're going to talk about Tobe Hooper's Lifeforce. I'm your host, Diego CRESPO.
Yeah.
With me, my co-host, Matt GURINGO.
The good thing is we barely had started talking about the movie.
Yeah. We were talking about, like, Hooper and, like, how good he was as, like, a filmmaker, and then...
We went on tangents about pirate films, and I was about to, like, dissect early American literature when we realized he had a problem. So thankfully, it's not as relevant to this.
I still have the energy to do the movie. I'll put it this way: I think we like Tobe Hooper and Lifeforce so much for this Halloween special that you suggested kind of last minute, like literally like 2 days before we were actually recording this episode. You're like, "Should we do that?" And I was like, "Yeah." We like it so much that we basically had no problem starting the recording like again when we saw that it didn't work on my end.
There was no like, well, we're out of things to talk about.
Can you ever possibly run out of things to talk about with both Lifeforce and Tobe Hooper? Like, sincerely.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's one of those. Here's something that there was a discourse recently where people were like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the great American movies. Come on now.
I did see that.
Someone was like,
fucking. Yeah, go ahead. You complain first, because I know we're both going to.
Look, I get it. Well, here's the thing. I'm like, look, Lifeforce is made for fucking dumbass pervert weirdos like us. Like, that's what Lifeforce is for. But like, Chainsaw Massacre is genuinely a masterpiece. Like, that is a undeniable, like, one of the important American 70s movies. I made the argument that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is more important to cinema than the entire French New Wave, but that's just me. But it's weird that it still feels disrespected in a way that Carpenter, even though we all love Carpenter still didn't make John Carpenter movie still didn't make the top Sight and Sound poll this like 2 years ago or whenever the fuck they did it again. And it kind of feels like we're at the time where it's like, can't Halloween at least make it on there? Like, aren't we're all in agreement on Halloween now, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I think The Thing is just so revered.
The Thing is obviously better, but Halloween just feels like it's one of those where it's like that it basically invented a genre, and like it's one of those where people have replicated Halloween so many times and never done it better. You know, like it's like it's a masterpiece, and still people are like, yeah, but he's a horror director. Like, what, you know, like I really had hoped that when Get Out won those Oscars that people were suddenly, okay, horror. Like, because they did not try to, like, pretend Get Out wasn't a horror film, you know?
I did hear, once in a while, I did still hear, well, you know, it's really more of a psychological horror film. And I'm like, they're fucking taking people's brains out of their fucking bodies. That's not very psychological. That seems a little physical, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, there's like dropping brains on the floor and guys getting impaled in the climax. Like, it is a total violent show by the end. And,
he stabs someone with, like, mounted antlers, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, fuck off. God bless Jordan Peele. Sorry. Just,
No, it's I just kind of hoped we had turned a corner in terms of how we discuss horror. And I think we have, but then there's been the weird like elevated horror discussion, right? Of like, which is that's become like a weird hot hot button just term, of
Hmm.
just like it can mean a million it can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. But like there is it's weird right now where it's like the two like quote unquote surprise hits of the year have been Long Legs and Terrifier 3, which are both at like the complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of horror, right?
Hmm.
uh like that's just interesting to me. So I don't know what that means for the genre itself, but it does feel like we either get geek shows or horror films that take themselves very seriously, which aren't problems individually, but where is there room for life force in that? And
I
if we
th-
don't have room for life force, that's a problem.
I agree. I think the space for Life Force right now is like the Shutter stuff, and they obviously are not funding $25 million stuff,
Yeah.
even without inflation. They're funding like $1 to $2 million things, and I think that's smart. They're not dropping Netflix money that they don't have. They're like, this is our base. Let's
Mhm.
play to it and keep building that, and that's why Shutter rocks, right?
Yeah.
That's the way right now, and I think whenever the death of this new version of Hollywood happens, because like it's not sustainable, it's
Mhm.
not equitable, and they're pushing more people out than they're letting in, so that means those people have to go somewhere, and they're not all gonna quit the industry. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
just large chunks, unfortunately. Best of luck to everyone, genuinely. Um,
Mhm.
I think these people are just like, I think it's a Terrifier 3 thing, you know? Now, ideally, you don't have to make a movie like that, like specifically.
Yeah.
Like, man, you're going to see some fucked up shit, you know? It's like, that's whatever the quality, whatever the opinions about those movies, like, that's fine, that's their thing. Not every
Mhm.
person should have to go out of their way to make that, right? And I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
why, like the Terrifier movies aren't very respected, but I think a lot of, like, industry pundits are like, no, but this is good. Like, this outcome is
Yeah.
good, and that it beat the algorithmically approved Joker 2. Not that it was like co-signed by an algorithm, but you know, we all understand like no, the computer's going to say, "Yeah, you make Joker 2 because the first one made $1 billion," right? And
Mhm.
it beat that. It beat the fucking production assembly line output, you know?
Mhm.
That's cool. Um and Terrifier is obviously just like a straight horror movie. So like that's with like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think now, for example, like that movie is much more respected by people like the Mark Kermodes of the world or something like that, right? One of my
Yeah.
boys. Um, who else is out there? Who's like a good critic right now in America that people actually do? Like, do people still
Well,
listen to
Mark
like
Kermode is
Richard
not
Roper?
American.
No, Mark Kermode is
Um,
not American, which is his great power and weakness.
I remember no offense to Richard Rover, but the last time I heard about him was when he gave BVS like a bad review and he got attacked by like Snyder
Oh,
stans.
okay.
Uh, that was like the last I remember hearing about him. Um, yeah, like the critic environment isn't the strongest in America
No, no,
right
I know a lot
now.
of people
Uh,
read David Ehrlich. I like Priscilla Page a lot. I don't really read Ehrlich that often, but
Ehrlich is weird where it's like he's like his writing can be annoying, but then he's also like free Palestine. So I'm like, Ehrlich, you get a pass on anything you write
yeah,
for
yeah,
the
you're
foreseeable
saying
future. Because
you're saying
you're
the
saying
right
what a lot
stuff
of your
there.
you're saying what a lot of your other critic buddies aren't willing to say. So so he can be pretentious as much as he wants. But there is a sort of all right, so I've made this joke because just because you brought up Joker, um, I have a review up for the first Joker, and I can't remember if I've ever brought it up on the show, even when we did Joker and hid it behind other things. Um, but Tarantino really liked Joker, right?
Hmm.
Which is Tarantino's getting old and he misses Taxi Driver in the 70s. Um, Like that's what Joker is. Joker is his Force Awakens. Um, but he referred to Joker as subversion on a massive scale. And he said and he compared it to the quiet success of Hellraiser in the late 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, my joke is, I said, nothing in the past 4 to 5 years has haunted me as much as that statement. But that was my joke. But then it's one of those things where when you break it down, Joker was not comparing Joker's success to Hellraiser's success is idiotic. Joker was mainstream. It was one of the highest grossing movies of its year, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was cinema in 2019. It wasn't subverting anything, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like Hellraiser was one of the top 10 grossing movies of 1989 or whatever the fuck. Like, it made money, but it wasn't that. Same with Reanimator. These are movies that were hitting under the surface, but they were hitting. Terrifier 3 is a lot closer to Hellraiser than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the subversion we're talking about. So like that's just Tarantino being an old man looking in the wrong spot.
Tarantino is I almost tweeted this out, but I didn't want fucking things like I don't want to annoy people. I just annoyed myself. But I always say, like, people need to get a little thicker skin when it comes to other people's opinions. Like, sometimes people just aren't going to agree with what you have to say or, like, what you like in art, right?
Yeah.
And then I was also going to put a picture of my response to when Tarantino's dissing, like, late-era Scorsese or or any, like, modern filmmakers like Michael Mann. I was going to pick a picture of a guy, like, ready to throw a punch. Because it's like, he annoys me with that. And then, I listened to him say something about, like, Abel Ferrara recently, where he's like, oh, like, there's Abel Ferrara written with Nick St. John, and then there's the rest. And it's like, okay, so you just stop liking these movies after, like, Bad Lieutenant, got it. Or New Rose Hotel. Like, that was 20 years ago, man. Like, whatever.
Well, you look at movies differently when you started making them and got rich. That's strange. I can't believe the movies feel differently now.
Yeah. But to just go back to the credit thing for 1 second.
Yes.
One of my other favorite film critics is Justin Chang. He initially wrote for the Los Angeles Times. He has since moved to New York. And he doesn't really tweet anymore. But I think the last thing he tweeted, like, he'll share links from, like, coworkers and stuff like that, right? And his work and all that stuff. I think he's, like, an editor primarily now. But the last thing he personally tweeted back in, like, August of 2024 this year, it's a quote. It says, trash, artsiness, and the movies. And I'm a big fan of his because he kind of takes, like Kermode sometimes has his dukes up for other stuff, right? But he really appreciates, like, no, this genre thing, like, it's trying something. Maybe it didn't work, but, and, like, I think he said the same thing about, like, Coralie Farger's Revenge, where he's like, I don't think this all works, but, I'm going to be there for the next thing she does, because she's got something, and then the substance, like, blows the doors off a lot of people's minds or whatever, right? I haven't seen it yet, but that's the take, right? And Justin Chang has a similar approach. So there are critics out there that, like, can look at the genre space and understand that, like, even though it's genre, like, it is art, it's still filmmaking. And I wish more people did that sooner, because then Tobe Hooper would maybe be more respected than just the guy who made Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because the other stuff's really interesting, even when it's not fucking Lifeforce, which is just wow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like, even though we're poking at Lifeforce a little bit for being insane, but, like, yeah, he does have a lot better, like, his run from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'd say, to Poltergeist are all, like, kind of solid movies, like, they're all in like that low budget sphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Eaten Alive is kind of like trying to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre again, like, it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre but with an alligator.
Yeah, it doesn't have, like, and I say this as a positive, it doesn't have the unwieldiness that Texas Chainsaw Massacre has. It's more of, like, a standard monster movie, and not fucking... You don't feel like you've just discovered something, like, almost cosmic in its presence, in its existence.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like... Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels like it might have been made by the people who killed everyone in it.
Yeah.
Like, It it has that vibe, and that's something you can't replicate. And he immediately, one thing that I think Cooper was smart about is he immediately gave up on trying to replicate Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just knew he would never be able to do it, and to the point that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is famously just basically a parody of Texas Chainsaw
Yeah,
Massacre.
I think when we
Um,
covered it, I said it's like I don't know exactly what it's about, but I think the first movie is about making the characters crazy, and then I
mm,
think it's the second one's just about making everyone like us crazy. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
we lose our minds to this. That's why
Uh-huh.
it's the protagonist swinging the chainsaw at the end. You're not
Mm,
escaping it like the end of the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
yes. No, it's like the insanity is like spread almost.
Yeah.
I mean, I always see it as I really see it as like a shift from like Nixon to Reagan. Like
Mhm.
that's what I always see
I
in
mean,
those
hey,
two
that's valid.
movies. So Reagan's the Lord of the Harvest. Uh, but uh, yeah, it's just he has such a good career that yeah, it just wasn't really respected. Now he's gone. Like he's been gone for a few years now. Um, and it's a shame. Um, you know what? I haven't seen like the last like two movies he did. I saw Toolbox Murders once, and I don't really remember it. I know some people like it, but I don't remember it very much.
Yeah, I
But
finally watched it. I haven't logged it yet. Um,
mm,
it feels like I like the movie a lot. It feels like
mm,
Saw took the vibe and got more successful from it.
okay.
I don't understand the circumstances of why that is, but clearly it's just that's what happened. But I
Mm,
like it a lot. I haven't
okay.
seen anything after Toolbox Murders. Actually, no,
Yeah.
that's not true. I finally saw Jin, which is
Yeah, which is like the movie he made in like the United Arab Emirates or whatever the fuck. Like it
yeah,
was like he had to get
um,
like outside funding for it.
yeah, really,
Um,
really cheap looking movie. It's got
mhm.
that early digital affectation. I think
Mm,
it's really interesting. I really like that
okay.
movie. Yeah,
I'll have to check because it got savaged when it was released.
mm-hmm.
Like it was like really torn apart when it initially came out.
Yeah.
Uh
My
so
letterbox peeps though, they're coming in clutch. There's a couple 3-star reviews. There's a heart,
mm,
and then there's like a five
mm,
star and a 4.5 star. Oh, here's a go. Here's another really fascinating film critic and filmmaker, Scout Tafoya. I like him a lot.
mm.
He gave it 4.5 stars. So yeah,
Right
yeah.
on.
Jin, thumbs up.
Um
Um, yeah, Toby
Both
Hooper.
top reviews are positive, save the bottom one, which is a 2 star. So it's got like two positives on like its letterboxed. Yeah, I have not. I just is it even like it's available to rent? I guess it's just one where like it felt like it was like it just suddenly it was here and then like gone. That was a weird release. Um, and and yeah, that was his last movie.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it felt like he had like a weird like that was like maybe his last win because he does that and like I listened to the commentary track for the Scream Factory release of Lifeforce, and the Scream Factory was released in like 2013, so must have been recorded around the same time he directed Jin.
Mm.
Um, so and he does sound a little older on the commentary, uh, you know, which what I'm not gonna blame the guy, he was fucking old.
Yeah.
Uh, like I'm not mad at him for it, but he does the commentary with someone from Scream Factory, and they're maybe not always on the same page in terms of what they want to talk about.
Oh.
Um, but it's not like unlistenable. Like it's not cringe. But it is one of those guys being like, man, this movie so fucking wild, and then two of them are being like, yeah, well, we shot it like that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, this is a fucking wild movie. It is kind of masterfully directed. You
Yes,
could,
we the quote we used in our recording that is now lost forever, was that it's peak schlock, masterfully directed. I believe that's what we said.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summation. I mean that was what you said. I'll give you credit. That's what you said. That was
Okay,
good.
I don't even remember.
Oh, that was like an hour ago. But yeah, that is exactly what it is. And I'll just espouse again because again it's lost forever. But you can just see this guy had like such an eye for like scope and scale, and he just never really got the opportunities outside of Poltergeist and Lifeforce to really showcase that.
Yeah.
Even like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a much bigger movie than his original. They don't have a lot there, but it's big.
Yeah. This was one of the most expensive movies Cannon ever did, and probably the largest budget Hooper ever had. And it's crazy when you consider that's like this and Poltergeist were probably his biggest budgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look up Poltergeist. Poltergeist is only a $10 million budget, so that's not that huge, right?
No, what the fuck?
And Poltergeist seems calculated to be a blockbuster, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like that movie was designed to be a crossover horror hit.
Yeah, produced by Steven Spielberg, directed by the guy who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Of course, that was going to print money, you know.
It's Stranger Things. It's like kid horror, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's creepy for the children, but it's like, you know, it's a horror movie, but it's going to have crossover appeal. Whereas Lifeforce, it has like I can't think of a movie. This is a movie that seems to has increasingly limited appeal the longer it goes on. And not really in an aggressive, like, I don't know, not in a what would be a good comparison? Like not in a something like John Carpenter's The Thing, where that movie is so nihilistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know we always have to be like where we watch The Thing and we go like, obviously a masterpiece. How did this bomb? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe because it opens with people trying to murder a dog, and then later that dog's face splits open and kills a bunch of other dogs. Like that, I can see that not appealing to the general public as much.
Yeah,
you know. But Lifeforce has a weird sort of like it's very clearly made because Alien was a hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which Alien itself was partly inspired by the movie Planet of the Vampires, one of the inspirations it took.
And again, Hooper's own Texas Chainsaw Massacre aesthetically, right?
Yes. Well, that was Ridley Scott bringing that in, which is interesting. But it's a B movie with an X rating, right? Like this is it feels more like something Empire Pictures would put out.
Mm-hmm.
Or Full Moon Features, right?
Yeah, but with a budget.
Like naked vampire lady eats people, like, and then it's like, yeah, $32 million. Like, you're like, what?
Wait, was it 32?
It's something high like
okay,
that.
I thought it was 25 million. 25
million.
Which
25
which
million.
is still fucking a lot for this.
That's high.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for Lifeforce. So, but like that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, this movie should be a $500,000 movie.
Yeah.
And should take place in one house. Like and then it's like, no, what if all of London exploded at the end of it? It's not shocking it didn't hit. But it is shocking that it exists. Do you want to take a minute? Let's take a minute to talk about the author of the book.
Yes, because I have
Colin
not read
Wilson.
this book, and I don't know anything about what you're about to say, basically.
I have not either. I have not read any Colin Wilson. But I am aware of him. The book is called The Space Vampires. The movie apparently was called Space Vampires until like a last minute decision was made, being like, no one's going to see a movie called Space Vampires, call it Lifeforce, right? Uh, which I guess I guess that makes sense
I do love the
in the
title.
80s. It is a good title. Um, but the original is explicitly called Space Vampires. Colin Wilson passed away 2013. Very strange literary career. Um, he's almost like a weird offshoot of objectivism. Um, he's he tried he tried to be he wrote a shit ton of nonfiction, but a lot of it was like pseudoscience and stuff like that. He's written a book about like the secret civilization that led from Atlantis to the Sphinx. That the Sphinx was actually built 10,000 years before Egypt even existed, right?
Hmm.
Like there's like a weird part of him where it's like, does he actually believe space vampires exist? Um he seems like the type of crazy that I might enjoy actually reading his books, right?
Hmm.
Um, he's also kind of like L. Ron Hubbard adjacent in terms of like thinking he could like revolutionize the world with his writing, but like minus the crazy controlling cult side of him, like he never
Yeah.
did anything horrible like that. But he did write a book called The Outsider, which is still like a relatively famous work, which argues about like outsiders and how they influence culture. And he finds parallels in people like H.G. Wells and Kafka and Hemingway and fucking Vincent van Gogh. It's kind of like tortured, starving artists type stuff, right?
Hmm.
Like, but it's interesting that this guy who basically wrote about pseudoscience as a real thing also had a fairly successful career as a writer of fantasy and horror fiction. He's written stuff like including a book called The Mind Parasites. He had a fantasy series called Spider World, which I've never read. Um, and I believe both Mind Parasite and the Space Vampires directly reference the Cthulhu mythos. So, like, these are technically works that are part of the Cthulhu mythos.
Mm.
They get lumped in the cosmic horror. I don't particularly get any cosmic horror vibes from this film. Maybe it's more present in the novel. From what I've read, it's not. But hey, he seems to like the aesthetics. He's kind of similar to um, who's the guy who wrote Wolfen? You ever seen Wolfen,
No,
the
no, I
movie?
haven't.
About the basically like the Native American werewolves in Chicago, I believe.
Oh no, no.
Um, that was a fiction book. Oh, Whitley Strieber, who also wrote The Hunger, another vampire story that was adapted into the great Tony Scott film.
Oh fuck yeah.
Um, but was also a guy who was like, "Yeah, I was abducted by aliens." Like, so there's a weird patch of those people. He wrote the book Communion. Have you ever heard of Communion?
Just
Uh,
the Catholic thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was adapted into a film starring Christopher Walken, and that is Whitley Strieber, semi fictionalized version of an alleged alien abduction that happened to him. So it's a guy he's written horror fiction, but also written quote unquote nonfiction, very similar to fucking Colin Wilson. Um, and Space Vampires, part of the reason what made me think of Life Force was we have just done the Keep recording, which that book tries to do a similar thing about our shared cultural experience of vampires and tries to attach it to this sort of ancient evil, whereas Colin Wilson's book seems to attach it to what we imagine as vampires are actually aliens,
Hmm.
which is also something that cropped up in The Last Witch Hunter, where witches are kind of like this other species that happens to live on our planet, right?
Hmm.
Uh, there's odd parallels with these kinds of things. Um, Although the movie brought up the Halley's Comet connection, and from what I've read of the space vampires, it might have a similar uh, unintentional reactionary subtext that the Keep had when I read it. Which go listen to the Keep episode if you want to hear me talk more about that.
Yeah, double dose of
Uh,
Halloween episodes this year.
yes, yeah, we're getting a few in. Um, and yeah, that basically led us to the Life Force, which uh, seems to have just taken the ball of the space vampires and ran with it as a premise, right? Uh,
Oh, did I lose you?
I don't know. I just my point
Oh,
ended.
okay. I just want to make sure. No, yeah, it's here's the thing. I want to go back to the cosmic horror element of it too, because I also agree it's not. I don't consider this cosmic horror. It's just like I don't think anything in space is inherently cosmic horror. You know, that I think
Yeah,
that's a very specific sense of like the unknowable and the dread that comes from that, and something we
yeah,
can't understand. And it's like, no, I think this is a very primal horror film in that
yes. This,
how do I put this? The end of the world is basically started by someone being incredibly horny. I mean, like,
yeah.
and I'm not being like silly here. Like the movie with the
No,
introduction
no.
astronauts are like they find the weird ship and the people in like cryostasis, um, and they're like they're kind of first they're fawning and then they're like this one older guy's being like really leering towards the naked woman in the frozen vessel, and he's like, "Oh no, we got to take them back. We got to take these people back. We got to make sure they're okay. But also, yeah, we really have to take her back." And it's that's not a term, primal horror, but I'm going to coin it for
Mhm.
this movie because it's or maybe carnal horror rather.
Yeah, yeah, carnal horror might make more
Yeah.
sense. No, there is nothing unknowable about the horror in this movie. This is the most like, yeah, I can see why this would cause the apocalypse. I can see these actions make a lot of sense, unfortunately. It's a sort of it's a female horror. It's a woman as monster horror, right? um, and it's often reflective of certain male ideas about sexuality and women that women secretly have power over us because of their beauty,
Mm-hmm.
right? That like, oh, I just can't control myself when I'm around a naked woman, right? Like there's some sort of weird ingrained sexist belief that men can't control themselves,
Yeah.
right? That that is idiotic,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, and this is just that all made literal with like magic, space, alien powers, and Matilda May being naked for most of the film. Um, you know, that's all. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, it's a it's a vampire tale. They're energy vampires as opposed to blood sucking vampires, and it's like it's a bit of a succubi type tale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's also that weird fear of like the sort of the life force being taken from people. And it's drained from people like like we just see it getting sucked out of them, basically. Uh, but it is a sort of like the person ends up drained, and then that drained person can then become a life force eater themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a weird sort of subconscious subtextual fear that giving into our sexuality, giving into our attraction to women can make us like women,
Mm-hmm.
right? That giving into our sexual desires will lessen us as men. It's that weird sort of like this is going back a few years, but like H Bomber Guy pointed out in his video on pickup artistry that like a lot of pickup artists don't actually seem to like sex. Like they actually seem to think there's something wrong with it, but they still desire women. It's whatever weird crossroads that happens in certain people's brains that like the sexual desire, but also the fear that our sexual desire will lessen us as men, you know?
I think
Um,
it's
but also,
that, but I think of like there's a line in Community where Jeff is like, oh, like this is like someone discovers his box of like garments that women have left behind after he hooks up with them, and you
yeah,
know
yeah.
that is like one's obviously fictional, but I think it's representative of like an idea that like when Troy brings it up to him, he's like, oh, like why do you have to like you can't just like collect it. Like, you know, like, because he's the more innocent one at that point. And he's like, no, they have to be one in, like,
Yeah,
battle. They have to be one in conquest. And it's like, that's a joke, but that's also, like, a horrifically vile thing to say. You know?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but I think that is part of that, too. You know, it's like, no. It's like, you want to be, like, triumphant. You want to, like conquer with that sort of mindset. You know? It's like, it's victorious instead
Yeah.
of, like, hey, maybe, like, a healthy relationship. I don't think... I don't think a healthy relationship involves conquest and victories. Individually,
You
anyways.
know, like, you know, communication is the secret ingredient to sex. Finding a way to have it where you're both enjoying yourselves.
Yeah,
Like,
that.
it's 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 not about how many times, right? Like, it's if you're having sex every night of the week, yeah, but like most of it sucks. Like, that don't mean shit. Um, but yeah, I mean, well, that's also isn't that that's the joke of Doctor Strangelove is that Jack D. Ripper basically like had experienced sexual climax and had that post, sexual climax drain and felt empty inside and became convinced it was a Russian conspiracy like, to drain our bodily fluids. Like that's part of the joke of that movie. um, so it's interesting and it is just funny when you consider how sleazy the movie is,
Mhm.
right? That it's just a like we're just this naked woman's just going to be walking around for most of this film in England, um, Thatcher era England. Uh, so, um, but it's I don't know I really enjoy it, but it is also like I don't know how to explain this. It doesn't function in the way a movie should function. Like it doesn't. The arcs of it aren't necessarily perfect. It has a bit of a and then vibe to it at times,
Yeah.
but everything it leads to is wild. So you can give it a bit of a pass at times.
Yeah, I think or I don't think I wonder rather if some of that is just Dan O'Bannon, my boy
Mm,
who has screenplay credit on this, who co-wrote it, or
mm,
gets a shared
mm.
screenplay credit with Don Jacoby,
Yeah.
who I'm unfamiliar with.
Yep.
But Dan O'Bannon, when he worked, he worked, and
Another
then obviously, yeah,
Yeah,
another,
another another famous
yeah.
pervert. Uh, and,
But his stuff, like I mean, there's all the stuff early on about Alien, where his draft with Ron Shusett maybe wasn't like as well refined as the past Walter Hill made, whatever, right? But competent writer, more than competent writer in my opinion, and I
yeah,
think we talk sometimes about like maybe some of these screenwriters are more interested in like the ideas and such, and maybe Dan
mm,
O'Bannon was just more interested in like the genre perversions and such like that. And that's not even a criticism. It's
yeah.
just like I think the movie itself leans more into that anyways. So some of the structural stuff is
He's
irrelevant in my opinion.
he's a child of the '50s era of those type of science fiction movies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a science fiction movie that are very much about like the monster as a scientific fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it is the blob comes from outer space and there's huge chunks of the blob of someone being like, quick, try dumping acid on it, right? Like there's a huge chunk of the Blob, the original 50s Blob, takes place at the doctor's office, mainly so the doctor can be like, yes, it seems to be doing this, and even when we try that, it doesn't work, you
Mm.
know? It's a lot of exploring, like treating it like it was the Blob was a real tangible substance, whereas then you get to the 80s Blob, and it's mainly a fucking geek show of violence,
Yeah.
right? And with satirical elements that are also
Yeah.
valuable. And I think Dan O'Bannon, one of the influences on this movie, and I would bet the book too, are the Quatermass films, which I've always been a huge fan of the
I feel
Quatermass
I should have watched
films.
them before this because I'll be honest, because we did this turnaround for this episode really fast. I didn't do a lot of research on it, but I have a lot of thoughts on this
Mm,
movie. And you've been
yeah,
championing me to watch those films for a while, and then I
yeah,
did see that that was sort of an inspiration for this movie as well. So I'm like, fuck, maybe I should have
yeah.
hopped over for that.
Particularly the first and third one. Quatermass in the Pit has a lot, which is the third one, has a lot of the stuff about like are our ideas of demons actually aliens? Like it has a lot of those ideas in it, and that was kind of a newer thing
Hmm.
in science fiction horror at the time. But the first Quatermass, um, which might be my favorite, the setup of that one is a ship comes back from outer space. We sent 5 people into outer space. It comes back and crash lands, and only one crew member is left, and all the others have like disintegrated. Basically, there's no one like their equipment's there, but they're all gone, and there's just something growing on the arm of the remaining astronaut. And that's basically the setup of the Quatermass experiment. And then we start seeing that thing growing, you know, turning into something else. And that's very Life Force esque,
Hmm.
right? That is basically there's even like the other astronaut that comes down later in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like um that's one of those things where like this movie being like talk about like weird pacing and visual problems. There's like 2 different space shuttle sequences in Life Force, which can make it a little confusing to follow. Uh, but um, but like a lot of this, I believe, is directly lifted from that, and I'm guessing Dan O'Bannon knew what he was doing when he lifted that stuff, right?
Hmm.
And again, a lot of that is people in laboratories, particularly Bernard Quatermass, the scientist, being like, well, the creature appears to be in plant-like origin. It's like, well, if you think in the vacuum of space, a plant that could survive, like there's a lot of long explanations as to how these things work. A lot of that is that era. You know, it's I was actually thinking about that. I've been reading a bunch of old. It's gonna be sound weird. A lot of old Flash comics, particularly like Flash from like the 50s and
Hmm.
60s comics. And a lot of those will have like a thing at the end being like, hey kids, here's how the chemistry of this villain works, like to explain the science. And from what I understand, a lot of this stuff entering the culture, even in our goofy horror movies, but also our superhero comics, was part of a general nationalistic drive to for scientific betterment as part of the space race, right?
Hmm.
Like there was a sort of national vibe of like, yes, let's all do this. Let's all explore this stuff in our writing, in our fiction, in our popular culture, because it will help us get to the moon, you
Hmm.
know? So it's a weird thing that infuses us. And then now, cut to Life Force coming out, it's the 80s, and essentially the dream of space is like dying by this point, right? Like we've given up on, you know, Reagan. When Reagan's elected, one of the first things he does is take the solar panels off the roof of the White House that Jimmy Carter had installed. And it's a very strong declaration of we are no longer looking forward. We are preserving what we have now, our traditions. Um, and so it's this weird mix that I think that's why 80s horror specifically science fiction type horror, has such an interesting vibe because it's 50s inspired, but that had a tinge of the optimism, and then a lot of the 80s horror takes those setups and adds a hint of the apocalypse,
Yeah.
right? Uh, a hint that we're at the end, that we're on the brink, which is partly what makes this fun, and that's partly what I like about Life Force. This is the sexual
Yeah,
apocalypse.
I have my first viewing logged on Letterboxd. I might have watched it a little bit before, but like it's the same year, 2017, where I called it
Mm.
Nosfakatu, and I think I'm patting myself on the back for that one. I actually think that's an appropriate summation. Instead of bringing plagues of like disease, you bring uh, horniness to the planet.
I mean, again, it's where the 80s were in a weird backlash to the sexual revolution,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a have your cake and eat it too movie, right? Where it's like sex is the thing that's destroying us all, but also you get to see this naked lady for most of the
Yeah.
movie. It's a weird it's a
Yeah,
weird
sex will
you know,
drain the
but
life out of you, and you'll become a weird, decrepit puppet man on a slab. But
yeah.
look how hot she is. Like,
Yeah. Also, why are we giving It Follows so much credit for its stupid
hey,
premise?
hey, hey! Look, I don't love that movie. That was made for
Mhm.
like a ham sandwich budget.
Yeah,
So
but people are like, this has a lot to say about human sexuality, and I'm like, no, it doesn't.
I think it's got something to say. I think you're being too harsh. That's not a movie you need to go too harsh on. Like I think it's whatever. But
I fuck that
okay,
movie.
well, I tried.
That was one where I'm like, I knew it was a fraud from fucking the start, but like we were so starved from horror in 2014 that like I kind of gave it a pass. And now when I look back and I'm like, that's some mediocre shit right there.
Well,
Um,
that's the
and
era
then
like where horror starts becoming quote unquote elevated, and now we
yeah,
like horror's everywhere. Horror's like saving the industry in a way, basically.
yeah,
So I understand.
yeah.
Like,
We're
yeah,
10 years.
we can.
It Follows is 10 years old
Yeah,
now.
it's also like that guy's first movie. So
No, it's his second
oh, it's his
movie.
first movie.
His first movie is a movie called The Myth of the American Sleepover, which some critic put on their top 10 of the decade, and I watched it and I hated
Okay,
it.
well, that happens
Um,
like all the
and
time. You
then
can't blame this guy for
and
that.
then and then he made Under the Silver Lake, another movie that I
Okay,
hated.
I like that one.
So the movie fucking blows chunks.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
But It Follows is nowhere
And
near as
then
good as Life Force.
and
You
now he's
said,
making They
yeah,
Follow.
because he almost went to director jail after Under the Silver Lake.
I mean, he's talk. You know what? He's someone who he has his movies all have the tinge of the fear of female sexuality that Life Force does, but then he doesn't get sleazy like Life Force, which is why he's a coward. Um, it's all those movies all his movies have a weird fear of sex, and I'm now looking at one of his first films. His first short film was called Virgin, so
Hmm.
um,
Wonder what that's about.
a it involves the Virgin Mary along with Scott's pursuit of true love. Who the fuck is Scott?
I don't know. Well, he's doing something
But
right now called Flowervale Street, and
well,
allegedly there's like dinosaurs in it.
but that's been like talked about since Under the Silver Lake came out, and nothing has really materialized.
Hmm.
So I bet you he's doing They Follow to get that funded.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Huh? That feels like what's happening there. But fuck It Follows.
I'll
Um,
be there for They Follow.
the Virgin It Follows
The
versus the
Chad Life
Chad
Force.
Life Force. Yeah. Fuck yeah, motherfucker. Um, so
All right, but let's see. I want to talk a little bit more about the production crew. So we got Dan O'Bannon. We talked about him a little
okay.
bit. Golden Globus, the legendary Canon producers that produced until fucking they rode the wheels off, basically, you know?
Yeah, this is the beginning of them like spinning. This is the beginning of them like it's the year we talked about this. They released Death Wish 3 and Invasion USA, which are both hits, but it's also the year they released Life Force, and then like starting like right when they kind of go into business with Tobe Hooper, and like right by the time Texas Chainsaw 2 and Invaders from Mars, which they did both, come out, it's like, oh, things are out of control at this point.
No. But wisely, I think, for the cinematographer, Tobe Hooper, while he himself is obviously very talented and was such a great director at mounting productions that looked way larger than they were, he went to like a blockbuster cinematographer and someone named Alan Hume. Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so didn't he do one of the Star Wars?
He did Return of the Jedi, which,
yes.
not as good looking as the first and Empire, but still, looks
still pretty fucking darn good looking.
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so like it's that movie gets too much flack now. You're all fucking crazy. Star Wars broke everyone's
I'm glad
brain.
you brought that. I'm glad you brought that up because apparently they were shooting on the Star Wars sets at Elstree around at the same time as Ridley Scott's Legend.
Wow.
And or even ran into some production delays when the fire happened on the Legend set. Tobe Hooper brings it up in the commentary for the movie. In a fun way. We're kind of like, yeah, everyone. There was some other movie that was being shot there too at the same time that I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was Legend and this were both being shot at the same time.
Well, they also use the Bond sets for that, which we bring up in the Legend discussion, which is also fitting because Alan Hume shot like 3 Bond movies. Octopussy, View to a Kill, For Your Eyes Only. So, and Supergirl? Everyone seen Supergirl? No?
Supergirl looks better than Supergirl has any right to look.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's it. Yeah.
Well, Tobe Hooper talks about loving that. Like Tobe Hooper in the commentary talks about how much he loves England and how much he enjoyed being there. And he said he had a great time shooting on these, and he's like he wishes he could make all his movies in England. Even with he was like, yeah, they have some weird union rules that makes it hard to shoot sometimes, but I had a great time. And I loved working on these sets.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron talks about that too, and like, hey, look, what weird guy when it comes to crews sometimes. But there's got to be something over there. It's like they get like multiple tea breaks and stuff like that, and like lunch breaks, and like, look, it's great to keep like everyone like happy. I do think at a point, if like you do have to make the day at some point. I don't know if I'd encourage 3 tea breaks.
Maybe don't open the massive stage doors just to let the tea lady in. Maybe don't. Maybe let her in through a side door, and then also keep James Cameron away because he'll attack the tea cart lady, which is allegedly what happened on the Aliens. Which I'm union yes, but that is a funny story.
Oh yeah, no, union yes, absolutely. Do you know who was in charge of the visual effects of this film? I bet you do.
Oh God, you know what? I know, but I forgot.
John Dykstra.
When you say it, John Dykstra, yes, inventor of the Dykstra Flex for Star Wars. No, this is everyone in this movie is overqualified for what it is. No one should have said yes to space vampires, frankly. Like, God bless everyone for doing it, but no one should have said yes to space vampires.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's telling that you and I are always like, yeah, it's a great idea. Like, I wish they made that movie, or like, I could see why they made that movie, even though it didn't work. This one is maybe like the first movie we've ever talked about where I'm like, no, really, I don't understand why someone said yes to this, let alone hundreds and maybe even thousands of people in this production.
It makes you wonder what could have happened if every Canon film had a $30 million budget. Like, it makes you wonder what cinema would look like.
It does.
Because they do take wild swings on things where you're like, this why does this exist? Like Ninja 3 The Domination or something like that. Like it's just like that's not a movie that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't.
And Lifeforce is just peak that.
There's a
But yeah, it's got amazing. I mean, this movie looks fucking good, which just again makes it crazier. Like of just for what the sleaziness of it, and I also really appreciate that, like, despite being written by Dan O'Bannon, there seems to be a really strong attempt to make it look nothing like Alien.
yeah.
Which I really appreciate because it feels like after this, every space horror movie looks like Alien
Mm-hmm.
to some degree. Like everyone is Alien or The
Yeah,
Thing.
the only like visual
which is
comparison I could probably give to the opening space stuff in particular, I'm like it's Star Trek the motion picture is what it most resembles.
yeah.
And that's even like
Hmm.
tangential. It's not riffing on it or anything like that. It's just that's the closest comparison I can make because there's some imagery, I guess I'll say, with the certain,
Yes. Oh, I know what your point. I know what you're
certain
talking
vaginal
about.
stuff going on there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's got very similar vaginal imagery to Alien, but in a way that doesn't evoke it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is some. There's a part of me that's like, we have to stop doing Giger ripoffs. Like we've just seen it too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we've done Giger too many times, and this finds a unique way to do it, which you wouldn't think from the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You would expect the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre to make something closer looking to Alien,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it is a sign of Hooper being someone willing to stretch. Were we dunking on Quentin Tarantino on this track, or was that the one that got deleted?
I think it was this
Uh,
one.
all right, because like that, this is a uh, Tarantino whole being like, I'm only making 10 films and then I'm done, and like him being like, directors' last movies are usually bad, and maybe their last few. But like, I think Tarantino really has something against directors who like stretch and try new things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's just like Hooper's trying stuff throughout most of his career. Most directors seem to want to stretch a little bit,
Yeah.
and you know, um, I think that should be commended a lot more than someone having even if the style is very good, but a somewhat repetitive style, you know?
Yeah, like
Um,
we've definitely dunked on Tarantino before. Director, I think we both still greatly admire his work.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but you and I definitely agree also on like I'm less interested in the prestige like perfect run. I want him to give stuff a
Mm,
shot. I want artists to try stuff, Like I want artists to be like if they're comfortable with it, like be nakedly open about who they are and what they're interested in. To a degree.
mhm.
To a degree. I'm not their therapist. I don't need to know everything. But
You wonder if Tarantino could have gone that way, but he gave something like From Dusk Till Dawn to Rodriguez,
Mhm.
Like like that feels like him being like, what if I did a Toby Hooper type movie?
Oh,
And
whoa! I never put that together.
mm,
That's good.
yeah. I mean, he does a commentary track for it, I think, with Rodriguez that I've listened to, and he talks about being influenced by stuff like that, and by Stephen King in particular. And I will admit, like From Dusk Till Dawn does feel like Stephen King via Tarantino, right?
Hmm.
Like where, you know, first chunk of a Stephen King story doesn't tend to have a ton of supernatural elements and sets up a lot of characters, and sometimes we'll have fake out protagonists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Ooh.
Tarantino doesn't usually write grimy, pulpy crime characters. That's Tarantino bringing it to it. So it's like, hey, Quentin, why not bring your vibe to 7 other genres? Like,
Yeah.
why not do that instead of making basically your war movie is a Western still. All your movies are Westerns. And I love Westerns, but man, we don't get enough of them these days. But you make
Also,
Westerns.
like, I know he only wants
So
to direct 10. Like, he didn't say he would stop writing movies, unless he did, in
that's
which
just,
case I don't care. So,
I don't know if he's gonna write movies, but his big thing has been that he's like, I'm gonna write novels when I'm done. He's like, I will write stories. So that's maybe where we will get Tarantino unleashed.
mhm.
Like we might get Tarantino being like, here's what I would do if I could write a monster movie. You know,
Yeah.
here's what I would do if I, you know, did a couple different things. Or maybe we'll finally get his fucking Star Trek thing out there, whatever the fuck that was supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Uh,
I would love for him to just write other screenplays for other people to direct, too. Toby Hooper didn't write all of his movies. He only wrote,
yeah.
like, 5 of his own movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Well,
The
that's
Mangler, Spontaneous Combustion, Eggshells, and The Heisters, which I have not seen.
mm. Well, that's also Scorsese's comment about Tarantino. Remember, Scorsese's like, we're built differently. And some people took that as a dunk, but it was Scorsese being like, I don't write my own stuff. Like, I work with screenwriters. Like, it's got to be harder for Quentin because he's got to write everything,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I understand why he's only doing 10. He's like, but I work with tons of people, so I can end up doing 30 different
Yeah, and look, we're,
things.
we're dunking on Tarantino
Uh,
a little bit, but like he also, I remember he went out of his way, like when someone asked about like Fincher or something like that, and he showed great respect for Fincher because he's a director and Tarantino's a writer
mm,
director, you know, and he's writing his own
mm,
material. Fincher is not, he's written, I think,
mm,
or he's credited on like maybe 2 movies that he's directed as
mhm.
a writer or co-writer, and that's completely valid. That should be allowed more. It feels like that's happening less and less, and that again is I've complained about it. It's totally an industry thing where they're like, we want to make a brand out of you so we could promote you and make money off you easier if it's like so and so's writing
I mean,
directing.
Tarantino is part of that.
Hmm.
Like, not his fault, but that was the Weinstein model, right?
Yeah.
Of like, we keep finding these wonder kids in fucking Tarantino and Soderbergh and Kevin Smith and fucking Robert Rodriguez. Like, they all write, and they tried to do that with the fucking Boondock Saints guy, but it didn't work.
Oh yeah.
But that they kind of built that sort of model of being like, look at these guys, they do it all. and yeah, I'm much more with like I love it's part of what I like about Hitchcock when you read about him, like how closely he would work with screenwriters, where like screenwriters would show up being like, all right, here's what I got, blah 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 blah, and then he'd just be like, yes no, all right, change this, okay, like they would work, like he'd like leave certain parts in other people's hands, and it allowed him to kind of become the visual filmmaker that he was. But you know, one isn't better than the other, but
Yeah.
we seem to be only allowing one type of filmmaker through these days.
Yeah, yeah. Like let people just fucking pick up a ball and run with it, you know? And then
Mm,
be supportive of the directors because even if like it's not working out and maybe you're going 5 weeks over, perhaps for a shoot that's originally
mm,
scheduled for 17 weeks, you do want to be in those directors' corners. You don't want to make it more difficult for anybody. I'm saying that because
mm.
Lifeforce went over schedule and I believe over budget, and thankfully, allegedly, according to one of the actors in the film, he said the Canon people were great. All they told Toby was just keep going, just power through, which is
That was some people, but not all. But I'm
yes,
glad they did it for Toby.
yes, yeah, yeah. Maybe they're like this
You can
guy.
find other stories of them cutting corners on some other. On Albert Pune probably got fucking had to take some shit every now and then from the
Yeah,
Canon
I was
guys.
just gonna say about Albert Pune that that guy was basically a maverick. As someone else we've talked about a couple times at this
Yeah, we
point,
talked about
but
Pune.
really just shout out to him for basically stealing money from these production companies and often making like 2 to 3 movies for the budget of one. Like,
Yeah.
hey man, that's fucking awesome. Make a movie about him, you know?
We've talked about trying to find a way to do Pune, but what's kind of funny is that like because of his way of directing, he directed very few actual bombs.
Yeah. That
Like
was like a huge
so
fucking shock.
yeah. Like even as we talked about maybe doing Sword and the Sorcerer for our fantasy thing. and that made like a shit ton of money compared to its budget.
Yeah.
So,
so way to go, Albert.
We might still just throw it in there just to fucking talk about it because fuck it. But
we'll have a subtitle: the non-failed fantasy blockbusters.
Yeah. When else are we going to talk about Albert P? Yeah. That should be just the subtitle.
Lifeforce, though. Let's see. What do we got? We haven't talked about the cast yet. And we talked a little bit about the
There's
production.
A lot of familiar faces in it, but I don't know how many people actually know these people, right? Of course, today's the day people are like, I'm going to message you on fucking Discord all day, you fucker. Don't know why. It's always when I record. It's
fine. I started putting Do Not Disturb on, so.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. No one messages me when we're not recording, so I never think to. But yeah, like it's a lot of people. Like I think we've already mentioned Matilda May, who was just a model, I believe, at the time. Tobe Hooper and the guy who I cannot think of their name, who did the commentary with them, maybe spend an inordinate amount of time discussing the casting process of Matilda May.
Oh, no.
It's never gross, but it is a sort of like, okay, like, we get it. Like, I've seen the movie. But I'm trying to think if I know her from anything else. Do you?
Have you ever seen The Jackal?
The remake of Day of the Jackal?
It's the Michael Keaton Jones one, yeah.
The one
with Bruce Willis.
I've definitely seen it on cable, but don't remember it at all.
Okay, yeah, she's got a supporting role in there.
You know what? Here's one. She was in Privateer 2, The Darkening.
I don't know what that is. Are you joking? Like, that's a thing?
That Privateer was a spin-off of the Wing Commander series of video games.
Oh, okay.
Wing Commander, one of those early space flight games. Privateer, first one, actually a pretty fucking great game. Starting with like Wing Commander 3, I believe, they started bringing in full motion live action video. And Wing Commander 3 had a cast starring Mark Hamill, Malcolm McDowell, and John Rhys Davies. And
wow.
Tom Wilson from Back to the Future. Forgot, are all in it. You basically play as Mark Hamill. Like 1994, it's a very like, hey kids, buy this video game. You get to play as Luke Skywalker. Like
infinite dollars.
Yeah, good game. Wing Commander, the first 4 Wing Commanders, good games. Privateer 2 is around the time shit started going off the rails for that kind of stuff, but it also integrated live action elements and had a cast, including Matilda May, but also including Clive Owen,
Jesus Christ,
John Hurt, Brian Blessed, David Warner, Jurgen Prochnow, and Christopher Walken.
Holy fucking shit.
And it is not even Christopher Walken's only FMV video game.
Oh my god.
Look, all right, anyone, if you want to, if you're in the mood for a laugh, look up Christopher Walken in the video game Ripper, I believe it was called. I gotta look. He is going fucking wild in it, is all I'll say. It's like, you could be a human shish kebab roasting in the penal institution.
I was just thinking about rewatching The King of New York, so maybe this is a sign.
Hey, go ahead. Ripper, the video game, has a cast including Christopher Walken, Paul Giamatti,
holy fucking shit,
Karen Allen, Burgess Meredith in his final performance, David Patrick Kelly, Ozzie Davis, and John Rhys Davies.
He's all over the place.
Yeah, he's actually good. He actually in Ripper, he actually, like, 'cause that's kind of a like cyberpunk noir point and click game, and John Rhys Davies has this great line in it. It's like feels like very like way too committed. Where he's to the detective who I think's name was Quinlan. He's like, Mr. Quinlan, if you have a knife with another man's fingerprints on it, you have the wrong murder weapon. Like it's just like Reese Davies' delivery of that is stuck in my brain forever. I'm just
This
feeling like, why
reliable
are you?
actor.
Yeah, reliable actor, kind of a cantankerous guy.
Yeah, to say the least.
I'd say at least, yeah. So, uh, this see again, like talking about like we need infrastructure like this in the fucking industry again, where it's like you could be working at TV movies, full motion video games, and Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like you can be
And
doing all that shit.
and people that look like normal people, even though they're still attractive and like
Yeah.
easy to watch on screen. You know what I mean? Like
What
that's also nice.
what broke that? Like when
Um,
I'm not this look, this is not me
hmm.
trying to dunk on your favorite show, but I always think of Lost when
Uh
I
huh.
think of like the cast of Lost becoming what television looked like for the next decade,
I wasn't gonna
right?
blame that. I was gonna blame something else I loved a little bit, just a little bit. Okay,
No, it's fine. It's like
but
I'm just looking for an answer.
yeah. I think the CW stuff, like very often,
Yeah.
it gets blamed for it. At least I don't always agree. I think of like the 100, where
Well,
everyone's
what
like, oh,
came first?
they show well, Lost came first, but I'm just thinking of stuff
Yeah.
like that. But like, I think it's like passing knowledge of the CW that gets the blame. When you actually watch the stuff, and I'm gonna bring up the 100 again, like because that's a post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
show. Everyone's like clean in the first episode when they're in space, and by the end of the
Mhm.
first season, they're like covered in blood and dirt. And by the end of the second season, they're like, "Oh no, we committed genocide on accident." And
And
it's so
this is not I'm not speaking to the quality or subject matters of the show. I'm just saying like that I think like they defined a certain look. And I think it's Lost because Lost comes a little before the CW house style becomes established, right?
maybe,
Like
yeah. I mean, 2004. When does like One Tree Hill and stuff start? Is that around that time?
um well Supernatural's the next year.
Yeah,
One
maybe Lost is the predecessor
and
to it.
One Tree Hill is the year before it.
Okay.
So it's like One Tree Hill, Lost, and then maybe Supernatural are the things that like codify it. Did you just
Maybe
someone just
primetime television in America then?
maybe? Well, also when is oh god, what's that show? The OC. OC's 2003. So OC
Hmm.
probably deserves more of the blame than Lost. So,
Hmm.
um, and again, OC was like savage in its time, and now I think people look back on the OC fairly fondly.
Yeah,
Huh?
right now that era is kind of going through like a big nostalgia bend, so we're probably going to start seeing
Yeah,
more movies take place in the 2000s now.
yeah.
That's
Well,
neither
it's
positive or
20-year rule.
negative.
20-year rule, man.
Hmm.
Like that's what happens. You know what? Maybe for some reason I thought Lost was Fox. I forgot that was ABC. It seems like such a weird channel for Lost to be on. Um,
That only happens because Abrams has the Alias cred. Alias was such a big
yeah.
hit, and then also Felicity, which I haven't seen.
Hmm.
Which was I believe co-run or co-worked on by Matt Reeves. So maybe
Yeah, yeah.
interesting stuff there. I got to check that out at some point. But
Hey,
yeah, that's
hey.
that's what gets him the fucking cred to get lost, and then they take that big fucking swing, and it works. So
Good for everyone.
yeah, I'm happy with the
Uh,
decision.
we still barely talked about the cast from
Oh yeah,
Lifeforce.
yeah. Do you know Steve Railsback from anything?
Um, it's one of those where like I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I do, and then I'm like, I can't think of it off the top of my head.
I
So I'm
don't
like,
I don't think I do either.
I'm going through his filmography. He's in the movie Turkey Shoot, which is like an Australian classic. He's the lead in that. Um, Kind of a like Mad Max ripoff. Um, he's in Alligator 2: The Mutation, which was one of my favorites growing up as a kid. It's a terrible movie.
Okay.
Uh, the first Alligator is the good one.
Okay, how does this get mutated? Do you remember?
Well, the first alligator's a mutated one.
No, well, like for the second one.
All right. Let me just read you the synopsis from the Wikipedia page
Okay.
to show you how dumb this is. Deep in the sewers beneath the city of Regent Park, another baby alligator feeds on the experimental animals discarded by Future Chemicals Corporation, which is what causes the alligator in the initial alligator to grow big.
Mm.
So it's not a unique mutation.
Oh, and there's no like mystery about like solving the mutation gene or something like that.
Here's the thing. Alligator 2 is made over 10 years after the original Alligator. I think Alligator 2 is a classic. It's a sequel, but it's basically a remake. Like I think they hit all the same beats. I think the only thing the Alligator 2 the mutation adds is there's a corruption angle in Alligator, but I believe Alligator 2 makes it straight up about like organized crime being involved in the chemical operations a little bit. I for some reason I remember I think the police chief gets like assassinated in Alligator 2.
Jesus Christ. By
But
the alligator?
No, like gangsters like come out and like shoot the fucking like drive his car off the road or something like that.
Does he at least get eaten by the alligator, like his body?
Well, here's all I'll say about the original Alligator and partly what I love about it. The original Alligator is probably the best Jaws ripoff ever made. Written by John Sayles. And it's very clear that John Sayles watched Jaws and was like, this is bullshit. The mayor should get eaten by the shark for being such a piece of shit. And he took a note, every note like that he took about Jaws, and he put it in Alligator.
Okay.
So be sure to check out Alligator. I love that movie. That movie's so good.
Frank Finlay? Any knowledge of Frank Finlay?
He's been in other British stuff. He looks like a vampire, so I'm like, he had to have been a vampire in something. He was in the Three Musketeers. He was Porthos in the Three Musketeers, the infamous Richard Lester Salkind produced Musketeers adaptation that was split into two movies without the actor's knowledge. And led to changes in how contracts could be written. So like you can't legally do that anymore because they basically paid the actors for one movie and then split it into two. And I don't think to be generous, maybe in a way I shouldn't. I don't believe that was done maliciously. I believe it was genuinely they had shot too long a movie that they intended to release as a road show and decided it would be easier to just split it into two movies. But then they tried to short all the actors in the aftermath.
Boo.
You know what? He was Iago in a 1965 adaptation of Othello starring Laurence Olivier. He's in A Study in Terror as Inspector Lestrade, the Sherlock Holmes character.
Do you know what his last credited role is?
No.
Honora in the BBC Merlin. Did you ever watch that?
Hey! You know what? I never did.
Okay. Big Tumblr show.
I know, and part of me is like, should I now? Like, is it too late? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Is it? Merlin was like the one that was like lumped into like kind of the Sherlock, Supernatural, Doctor Who, the Super Wholock shit, but wasn't like officially a part of it, so it never developed an annoying fan base. You know? Mm-hmm. Never got too big. Despite it having 65 episodes. That's a lot.
Yeah, for the BBC, Jesus Christ. I'm surprised they're not bankrupt.
Yeah, I should check that out. It sounds like it might be my kind of crap.
Yeah. We have to talk about Patrick Stewart being in this movie and looking exactly the fucking same for like 30 years.
That's what you do, man. When you go bald early, you look the same for a long time. I mean, when is this in relation to Dune? Is this like just before or just after
No, it's
Dune?
1 year after Dune. Dune's 84,
Okay.
so and this is
Mhm.
85. He should have brought
Rod
the
Stewart
pug
has
for
a
this movie.
Stewart has a weird career when
He
you really think
does.
about it.
No, it's
Like
very strange.
like God bless him, but he has a weird career.
Yeah, it feels like
He's
he
like
he he didn't take off until he was like in his late 30s, his 40s.
yeah. And it kind of is Star Trek. Like it's which like, you know, no one could have predicted that you would have a career like that,
Yeah, especially based
with Star
from
Trek.
Star Trek. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Star Trek The Next Generation, which like that first season is famously a disaster. And then it's like he basically was fan cast as every bald guy for like the next 10 years. And they
Yeah.
actually did it with Professor Xavier, which is even crazier when you think about it.
And that he was
Um
good.
yeah, he was good. He was the right choice,
Yeah.
you know? Like it's like, yeah, he's a perfect Xavier.
Yeah.
Um that's one of those things that they're running into, I think, with both the Spider-Man movies and like now that they have the X-Men. It's like they kind of did cast that first movie perfectly. Like, how are you gonna replace these guys?
Yeah. I
You
mean, it's
know?
kind of an open secret. They're like fucked, especially with like the
Mhm.
animated show like being such a hit. Uh,
Yeah.
Even if the guy who ran that show was a strange fellow to say the least, who should probably
All
just
right.
stop posting.
All right. Explain to me what happened there. Because, like, I kind of have bits and pieces of information. There's nothing to do with Life Force, but I would like an answer.
Okay, well, he is apparently very difficult to work with, and when he wasn't difficult to work with and taking credit for maybe writing he shouldn't
Mm,
have taken credit for, allegedly,
mm.
um, he was also allegedly uh, sexually harassing coworkers
Okay.
and
Okay.
subordinates. Um,
Mm,
and then this is not a negative or anything in the vein of that, but like once people found out he had an OnlyFans and then he got fired, I think people assumed like, oh, he is a gay man who got fired from the Walt Disney Corporation because he's a gay man with an OnlyFans because this industry doesn't
mm,
pay very well. So people
mm.
started defending him first, and I think a lot of other people rightfully were like, wait, wait a
Yeah.
second, something's not right here.
Yeah. That's
So
kind of been me, like, where I was like, something doesn't add up.
yeah,
Like, and I don't even want to cast aspersions because I still there's still a lot of unknown knowns or whatever the fuck. Like
hmm
but there is I always think it's something that's like it's not like the cast leapt. It's not like other people leapt to his defense when he got fired,
yeah,
right? Like I understand fans, but if the
the people that
people
actually
there,
were alongside him.
yeah, yeah. So uh, he has a writing credit on basically every episode. Um, And if what you're saying is true about taking credit, I have a feeling maybe since it's rarely a single writing credit, it's usually a co-writing credit. So, uh, hey, um, hopefully he wasn't like integral to it because I would like for that show to continue to be successful. Um, but are they doing more, or was it like meant to just be a one-off thing?
No, they're doing more. They're doing at least one more
Okay.
season, and I believe a third,
Uh-huh.
and then they'll probably
'Cause it was
cancel
kind
it, even though it's
yeah,
successful.
oh geez, I am so glad I remembered this when we were recording. Everyone out there listening, everyone hear my voice. Listen to me. Castlevania Nocturne Season 2 premieres in January 2025. Yes, the horror themed anime that Netflix produced is premiering in January. It has yet to be renewed for a third season. Allegedly, the entire cast and crew is on hiatus. So, everyone listening to my voice right now, look up the date, put it in your calendar. when Castlevania Nocturne season 2 drops, I want you to, when you're going out to get groceries, I want you to put that on your Netflix and just let it play and just keep doing that over and over again whenever you're not using your TV. So we can get a season 3 out of it because Castlevania rules. And if Netflix cancels that, I have so little to hold on to in this world, Diego. I have so little. They're not even making new Castlevania games. God damn it! Fucking fucking people. If you love me, if you love me, you fucking go there. Fucking pump those numbers up. We're getting a season 3, god damn it. Not letting it happen again.
They're only on season 2. Didn't that start like 6 years ago or something?
It started in 2023, and for some reason it's been a slow rollout of the second season.
Wait, there's only
Um
2 seasons of this show. There's no way it started before that.
no, Castlevania Nocturne is the second series. There was a Castlevania
Oh, okay.
series. There was Castlevania that lasted 4 seasons and premiered in 2017. And that was on a very regimented 1 season per year. And then Castlevania Nocturne premiered in 2023. And the next season doesn't premiere until January 2025. Uh, and they're very short seasons, too. They're like 8 episode seasons. And the show's a half hour. So, it's basically a movie. So, it's a movie's worth of stuff.
All right.
Uh, but there's a lot of story there. And it's good. So you
right,
fuckers better not you fuckers don't let me down.
I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a shot.
It's an adaptation of Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, which have 2 great stories in the Castlevania series. So, don't you fuck this up for me, you little shits.
Okay, well here, because
I'm also writing speeches for Kamala Harris, by the way.
Oh.
I'm practicing a little bit here.
All right, I want to take a look at Lifeforce from the lens of animation because I think Lifeforce, it's still kind of a hard movie to recommend unless you're like a big genre head, frankly.
Yeah.
Like I really can't just recommend it to Sally and Joe down the street. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, we don't want to watch something for Halloween. I'm like, well, if I want to like throw you off completely, like, yeah, watch Lifeforce. Yeah. But like, if it was an animated show, I do think it would like be easier for people to receive because there's stuff like Castlevania, which I have not seen, but I understand has a very strange like narrative to it.
No, it's a similar visual vibe too, and like Vampire Hunter D would be another similar visual to this. Like, you ever want to see just blood start pouring out of people's faces, forming into a ball and turning into a woman in a helicopter?
Oh, it's so great. It's so great.
It's the best. But it is like, that is such a like animated shot, right? Like it is such but done with very practical 80s effects. Like it wouldn't, not to be that guy, but it wouldn't look as good as CGI, right? Like it would just look, unless you were like a master of it,
Yeah, you'd have to light
CGI
that
version.
room for the CG perfectly.
Yeah, I can see the CG version of it, and it just looks terrible. It looks like all those based on true story haunted house movies where the house just explodes at the end. But yeah, it's if you were someone who got into anime because you heard there was violence and boobs in it, Lifeforce is perfect for you.
Yeah, that is the same vibe. I will say, I think there is a way to make that blood ball look good because J.J. Abrams kept going back to that red ball well between Alias and his first Star Trek movie. That keeps happening. And I think it looks good in both. So, but again, yeah, very specific requirements to get it to look good like that, and I'm sure even more specific requirements to get it to look like that practically, which is just an insane thing that they accomplished in this thing. And like, I want to also reiterate, like, it doesn't necessarily look realistic but
No.
it's expressionistic, you know.
I mean, I'm honestly glad I remember Castlevania because it does have that kind of more cartoony without being like Saturday morning cartoon look to it, right? It's a visual
Mm-hmm.
style that is rarely embraced. It feels like in live action,
Mm-hmm.
of just like it's not real. Like when the drained bodies sit up, it doesn't look like a real human corpse.
Yeah, but it's
But
still fucking awesome.
it I think I've done that where I've made this comparison as a positive and a negative, and in this instance I mean it as a positive. It does feel like when you're on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, like it has the Haunted Mansion type feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just with more blood and boobs.
Yeah. Oh, is that not on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride? Where the fuck have I
No,
been going?
believe it or not, it is not. Unless you're one of those crazy QAnon people that thinks all the Disney rides have secret messages on them
Yeah. Or
because woke.
yeah.
But
Or my favorite clickhole article ever, where it's like the fox on the Small World
yeah,
keeps
on
calling me by my
Splash
name and
Mountain,
saying it's gonna marry my dad.
yeah, something insane like that. Um, what did Dan O'Bannon like? Dan O'Bannon definitely had a fascination between the connection of the sexual impulse and the death impulse.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's like there's literally a scene in this where someone becomes sexually attracted to a drained corpse that is staring at him. Now, in the text of the film, it is the sort of vampiric aura that the drained body is giving off, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is attracting the person to it. But subtextually, it is a sort of the belief that there's a connection between the sex drive and a sort of death drive we all have.
Yeah.
Um, your thoughts, Diego?
Well, I think I find it fascinating that Dan O'Bannon can even be discussed in these terms because I only know him as the old grumpy grandpa in the Alien special features and in interviews where he's
Where he's
like,
wearing suspenders.
yeah, and he's soft spoken like this and kind of
And they took more credit than they should have.
yeah,
Bastards.
and and he does the old person thing where they're kind of like a lot,
Long pauses
yeah,
to make a point.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he didn't get the respect he deserved in the project.
Yeah.
And then also
They tried to
apologize
all
for
they
how he
did was
treated
cross the
people on
names
Return of the
off.
Living Dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like I mean, the Return of the Living Dead is full of that kind of imagery, right? Of
Yeah,
just like the punk girl who like her. She said, doesn't like the punk girl like straight up say her fantasy is that she'll get eaten alive by a bunch of corpses
it's
or
something like
something like
that. But
that.
yeah, Trash is
And
the character's name, who's tons of fun in that movie,
yeah,
even though it is like a very like obvious like
yeah,
sexual pull for the audience. But there
yeah.
is
It's
it's
Anna
totally there
Quigley,
in that
like
movie too. Which is
yeah,
not a failed blockbuster, so sorry, I won't be talking about that.
no,
We can talk about the
but
other ones though.
it has a similar like spiraling out of control death and sex vibe, like. And then Alien, of course, the whole thing about Alien is that that's the setup of it is a sort of violation of the human body. Um, so
Yeah,
now
because I
it's
think
always weird
he's
when they try and say like they like a lot of people take credit for too much of Alien, but like you can definitely feel what ideas were O'Bannon's in Alien, and
yeah.
that's definitely got to be one of them.
And look, as much as
So
I make fun of like screenwriting Twitter, screenwriters do just frankly deserve more credit than they're given anyway. So if someone wants a little more credit, whatever. Yeah, give it to them. They're just
frankly think everyone deserves more credit than they actually deserve. I
hundred
think
percent.
I think
Yes.
everyone we should be over credited in the arts, like to the point where it's like, yeah, but like that doesn't add up, and it's like, who cares? Pay them all.
Yeah.
Like the only people who deserve less credit are the studio heads.
hmm
Like the studio heads are not allowed to even have. It's like like when the fucking owner gets to hold up the Super Bowl trophy. Like fuck that. Like
Yeah, like you did nothing.
it you
You
did
did less than
nothing.
nothing.
You did, yeah. Like basically, there's always a debate about like, was it the coaching, or was it the actual talent of the players, or who's actually running this institution? It's like they all deserve to get more credit than they deserve, except the owner, who literally deserves none of the credit. So
yeah.
yeah,
But I
but
see the strange interest Dan O'Bannon has with how these people like fit into these genre spaces, and like
yeah,
it's so bizarre that that little man had like this really weird mean streak and like horny streak,
yeah.
but maybe it's
Well, I
like
think he's
just as a
obsessed.
child of the 50s and 60s.
I think he was obsessed with like what they call like they actually call the post orgasm the little death. Like that's actually a phrase going back to like the 1500s. Um, and if you experience that, that's so like it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to think about.
You know what?
Um,
And like with the characters in Return of the Living Dead, the punks, and like they're the protagonists
yeah,
essentially of the movie, and they're fun to like be around. And Dan O'Bannon is on record being like, "I hated these movies that were showing these punks as villains and thugs. I knew punks; they're the nicest people, so I put them in the movie." And so it's like maybe he was just like a weird sex freak, and I mean like weird in a positive way, not in like a
yeah, yeah.
not a bad way.
I I think he might have been both kind of weird sex freaks.
I
I
mean,
think he might have been both. Um,
I'm not. I don't know enough
yeah.
there about that, but yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, sometimes you sign up for a movie and you don't realize you're working with a weird sex freak. Doesn't
Mm.
mean he crossed the line, but that also doesn't mean you're like, once you realize you are, it will feel a little weird.
Mm.
So, um, but yeah, he was a weird sex freak and he had Crohn's disease. Can't relate to him, but,
No, I mean,
but
a huge inspiration creatively for the most part. I'll say,
yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah, what am I getting my fucking cash in on this fucking Crohn's disease shit? What am I fucking getting? I want that alien money, god damn it, for having Crohn's, you fucking piece of shit. God damn.
I actually
Uh
don't know what conversations entailed between Dan O'Bannon and Toby Hooper, though. Do you know anything?
yeah, you know what? They didn't talk about it a ton on the commentary, but he had nothing but nice things to say about Dan O'Bannon. He said like, yeah, I liked
That's
working
good.
with him, and they would work together on Invaders from Mars. So it must have been a good collaborative experience. Um,
That's
but
good.
that's all I really know. But
Okay.
there weren't like stories about being like, I wanted this, but O'Bannon wanted that. Like there was nothing that I knew that were like that. Um,
Hmm.
so for all I know, it went well. Although Hooper later said Lifeforce had a great look but lacked a screenplay. There wasn't a hell of a lot that could be done about that except to change it completely. The film started off as Space Vampires, and that's actually what it should have been called. With that title, you'd look at that picture with a completely different set of sunglasses. It's an interesting quote.
That is an interesting
Um,
quote, huh? I don't know how I feel
Colin
about it.
Wilson. Colin Wilson was not happy with the final product
Oh
of the
no.
film. Yeah. Uh, Yeah. So John Fallows had once told me that the film of the Magnus was the worst movie he'd ever seen. After seeing Life Force, I sent him a postcard telling him I got one better. Um,
Mm.
but I haven't read the book, so I can't tell. And the only thing I was trying to find like other people writing about it. There's this great blog. I've read it before, but it's a really if you want like an old style blog that is still updating. There's a great blog called Too Much Horror Fiction on Blogspot, and it was updated as recently as today. There was a new review, and it's been a guy who goes, Will Erickson. You might recognize him. He's on Twitter. He was instrumental in the Paperbacks from Hell getting released. He's been writing shit since 2010 on this blog. And I was hoping he had written something about Colin Wilson, and the only thing he had written was about Colin Wilson's book, The Mind Parasite, which he said was much more of a science fiction novel than a horror novel, and was a little too self-serious and pretentious for his taste. Uh, so that was written I think like 8 years before Space Vampires. He could have changed his style between then, but something tells me Colin Wilson took his Space Vampires idea very seriously.
Hmm.
And if you did, you maybe wouldn't like if this was the movie that was made as a result.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't want to credit that like, oh, you got to take it more seriously, but the film was released going head to head with Ron Howard's Cocoon, which is a film that takes itself much
Oh
more
boy,
seriously, and Cocoon
yeah.
kicked its ass because Lifeforce opened at
Yeah.
fourth. So,
Have you seen Cocoon?
like fucking years ago, I remember liking it.
Yeah, that was one of those ones my dad really liked,
Maybe that's
and
it.
he would try to get me to watch it, and I would kind of just be like, "Hey," like it didn't hit me in the way that it hit him, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, which he's also like that with another Ron Howard movie, Splash, um,
I've
which
never
is another
seen
movie.
Splash. I just know the GIF.
Which one's that?
It's when the lady's running into the water.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, okay. I guess because
Mm.
it's like it's about like a mermaid or something, right? That becomes a
Yeah,
human.
yeah, and you know what? And very in a very Matilda May style scene when she comes out of the water with legs, she's completely naked,
Yeah, yeah. Well, she
and
runs back
it's at
into
the
the
statue.
water. She's naked, so there's like a shot of her butt, and I guess there was accusations of Disney Plus censoring it, and then someone rightfully recognized that not technically a censorship thing, but it's the TV version that's like family
Yeah,
friendly because you can't
yeah.
show a butt
They made her hair longer in the TV edit to cover her butt.
Yeah.
From what I understand. Yeah, but that. I think that is when she is coming out of the water, though.
Oh,
That's
okay.
for some reason that's the only scene from that movie that really sticks out in my mind.
Hmm.
Uh,
Strange. Well, it's the only image
but
I know of the movie because people were talking about that discourse, and then other people were like, "Oh yeah, I remember growing up with that." It seems like a key
the other
element of the
thing,
coming of age for a lot of older men for some reason.
yeah. Well, I made the joke, and this applies to my father. I said like, if this was one of your favorite movies growing up, your first marriage will end in divorce. Yeah, I said if you're a fella and this film is a favorite of yours, your first marriage will end in divorce.
Good lord. I mean,
The only other funny note of that is that Tom Hanks and John Candy are supposed to be brothers,
I
which is
didn't know
very
they were in
funny.
the movie, so maybe I do have to
You
watch it
didn't
now.
you didn't know Tom Hanks was the lead of
No,
Splash?
I knew Tom Hanks, John Candy.
Oh, okay, okay. Did you know that The Little Mermaid almost didn't get made because of Splash?
No, I didn't.
Because it was produced, it was Disney produced Splash, and it was like their first hit in like a decade. And when they were doing like a Gong Show style pitches for possible animated films, genius Jeffrey Katzenberg said, "We already did that story. We did Splash. No one wants to see that again."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And I think Eisner someone overruled him. And then also famously, another Jeffrey Katzenberg moment. Um, uh, he wanted to cut part of your world from The Little Mermaid because a kid dropped his popcorn during a test screening.
What?
Yeah, he was like, "Kids, that song's boring, people. We gotta cut it."
Have these fucking studio heads always been fucking morons?
Jeffrey Katzenberg, definitely.
Okay.
And I believe Jeffrey Katzenberg, like, I don't want to quote this specifically, but I do believe Jeffrey Katzenberg was like, "I'm working harder than ever for the Biden campaign," like right before Biden dropped out. Like,
That's beautiful.
there's never been a wronger man.
That's a good
in
summation of him.
yeah.
Wow. That's really
So
incredible.
yeah. God, I guess God bless you, Jeffrey Katzenberg.
No, I don't think so.
No, no, no.
I want to read
Um,
some critical responses to Lifeforce from when it was coming
oh, I'm
out.
sure they were all glowing.
Yeah, among the many negative reviews from critics, Janet Maslin, a New York Times critic, said its style is shrill and fragmented enough to turn Lifeforce into hysterical vampire porn.
See, that's how you know Janet Maslin's a good critic. Because I believe Ebert was the one who actually said this. You should be able to read a review, even a negative review, and be able to tell if you will like the movie from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Yeah. No, it's an accurate summation of the movie.
Yeah, she's 100% right.
Yeah,
and 5 stars from me.
Yeah. Well, hey, adjacent to Ebert, Siskel gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
Yeah, but also Siskel was like a quiet pervert.
Yeah. And then Ebert was the occasionally loud pervert with like a megaphone,
right.
But only sometimes.
Ebert had like the weirdest ones. But also Weebert, so like I guess we shouldn't be too shocked in being his love of anime. But like Gene Siskel used to hang out at like the Playboy Mansion and shit. Like so it's not, I'm not shocked he enjoyed Lifeforce.
Yeah. You know what? This movie's horny 9/11. I think that's what this movie is.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Let's call it that. London.
That's my next letterbox log for this incredible movie that I do really love.
Yeah.
And not in a guilty pleasure way. I genuinely think it's very well made. Just the story content and material is flabbergasting.
You brought up 9/11, which got me thinking about 28 Days Later.
Mm-hmm.
And like the setup of that movie is like the guy was in a coma when the apocalypse happened. Imagine if you were in a coma for Lifeforce and then you wake up and you're like, what happened? And someone has to explain to you what happened.
They wouldn't be able to do it.
You would just be like, nothing.
Yeah, I'd be like, you know what?
You know what?
I don't. Let's go. Come on. You're like, what? Well, I didn't know what happened before I move on. You don't. Come on.
75% of the population of London went to live on a farm. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. We didn't super spoil Lifeforce, so you should go watch it.
I mean, because it's not a plot heavy film. Like a lot happens. It's space vampires. The thing in space looks like a castle kind of, but also looks like weird vaginal organisms. It draws parallels to vampire mythology and alien mythology. It was shit that was all the rage in the 70s and 80s. It's what was going on in the culture.
Yeah.
And then we got the Virgin It Follows 40 years later.
Well, Lifeforce has genuinely incredible special effects for the time. Again, not that they're realistic, but just they're exciting. They're genuinely exciting in how they're shot and how they're used. The practical effects are so sick in this movie. They're so fucking sick. I feel like when we say like the space vampires, where people maybe are assuming like, oh, like because you see the naked lady, like, oh, there's like vampire, like the people with teeth and stuff. Like there are like genuine like monster shit in this too.
They do find space bats. Like that's the initial thing they find.
Mm-hmm.
And
so like that shit's great. All that shit's great. It's kind of a genre lover's paradise. This movie, frankly.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it feels like a mistranslated anime from the 90s.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good way of putting it.
It really does. Like, it feels like someone dubbed it wrong. There's a lot of missing context, but holy fucking shit, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to remember a word people said other than when they said something genuinely insane, but you're going to remember these visuals forever.
Yeah.
And then you'll log online, and there will be forums dedicated to overanalyzing each individual image.
The last thing I want to bring up for myself is that the music was done by Henry Mancini. Some of his stuff was replaced with the great Michael Kamen, but it is mostly Mancini. Like the score, the dun 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 dun, the one that John Ottman used to rip off for the X-Men trilogy. Not a criticism. If you're gonna steal from the best. It's a banger. The music in this is really great. I don't know the different stuff between Mancini and Michael Kamen, but it's all very good. And Michael Kamen's a very good composer in his own right. And I don't know why he stopped. I hope he's not dead and I just completely forgot. That would be a bummer.
Yeah. Well, this year the Michael Kamen stuff was only for the American shorter edit to kind of like bridge gaps that because the American cut of this movie is something like 15 minutes shorter.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's one of those like it was like really edited down. But I believe the version that is now widely available is the international director's cut version, which is 116 minutes.
Yes. Also, Michael Kamen is dead. Yeah, I forgot. My bad. That's why he doesn't compose music anymore.
Yeah. It turns out he died in the year 2003. So it's been a minute, Diego.
Yeah, you know what? That's on me.
It is. But yeah, and sometimes these movies from this era where people talk about the practical effects, sometimes they're remembering it better in their head, and you watch it now really cleaned up on a Blu-ray, and it doesn't look as good. This is a perfect movie to own on a Blu-ray. Like it looks stellar, and it really plays with colors in a way that a lot of other movies that got brought to Blu-ray don't, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend Lifeforce. You might not love it, but I think you'll be entertained by it. So
yeah, it was also Tobe Hooper. Like when he got the green light for this from Canon Films, he wanted to make like a 70 millimeter special event film, like the films he grew up with, and so it was shot in 35 millimeter, but transferred to 70 millimeter for prints. And lo and behold, I missed a screening of this earlier in the summer because I was at Comic-Con, or I was just in San Diego. But they are playing it again in Los Angeles at the Fine Arts Theater in Beverly Hills, a 70 millimeter presentation. Probably that same print I missed earlier this year. So
yeah, he talked about the 70 millimeter print on the commentary and personally overseeing the color correction for the Blu-ray release.
Oh, that's
based
awesome.
on the 70 millimeter
that's why it looks
version.
fucking great.
So yeah. It's not James Cameron color correction.
Is James Cameron just like does he just like hate grain? Is he one of those guys that like doesn't like that and they want the cleanest image possible? Is that it, you think?
I don't know. I think so. Well, like part of it is that weird like I talk about how like Avatar Way of Water looked so crisp that like my brain was telling me water was dripping on my head when I saw rain in the movie.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be what he's been pushing for his whole career. And then also like when I saw the Titanic re-release in 3D, like it looked good in 3D, which kind of surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is something he's just been pushing for, and he doesn't really care if you loved it the other way, right? Like he doesn't. He's like, no, but this is what I was trying. I couldn't do it like this then, and it's what I've been trying to do. I mean, he's a little bit George Lucas-y in that way, of George being too annoyed with his little mistakes to embrace them. But
I guess Cameron even hates like or doesn't hate, but he's like not happy with the first Terminator. He's like, no, I didn't have enough money to do what I wanted to do, and it's like, dude, what you did is like game changing.
I understand that considering like his vision, right? Like considering like what he ends up doing, where it's like he's been building to Avatar his whole career, basically. Like and like even then, the leap made between Avatar 2009 and Way of Water 2022 is incredible in its own right, So he's still pushing for something. So I can understand him being like, yeah, I wanted to do a lot more with Terminator, but we didn't have the budget and it wasn't physically possible in 1984.
I do understand like looking back at your own work and being the one to see the imperfections, but like, dude, that first Terminator for that budget, it feels like 10 times bigger. Yeah. So I don't know, whatever. We're not here to talk about James Cameron. We're here to talk and thank Tobe Hooper for another incredible body of work.
Yeah. Bless you, Hooper. He's been gone for like 7 years now, I believe.
7 years, yeah. Well,
Uh,
we had mentioned, I
yeah.
want to mention it again on this time recording. But we were bringing up how there's kind of a resurgence of Toby Hooper in 2017. It looked like people were really getting excited about his work again, and not that he was gearing up to do anything, as far as I know. But
Yeah.
just people are really embracing it, and not that I think this was an essential part of it, but I think it was part of it. The letterbox user Cinemonster, who does the annual Toby Hooper Fest.
I was about to bring that up, the Hooptober,
Hooptober, yeah, every year.
that
This is the
people do.
11th year. I only participated like once or twice, and I like looking at other people's lists for recommendations and stuff. I would
Same, yeah.
recommend, if you're curious, check out Letterboxd Hooptober Festival. It's every Halloween, every October. There must always be a Toby Hooper film in there, but it's a way to like celebrate a bunch of genre horror stuff for
It's a
spooky
way to
season.
celebrate and also to like get you out of your comfort zone when it comes to picking a horror movie
Hmm.
for October, like to try new things.
Yeah, I believe this
Um,
year there's like it recommended like 3 films from Indian cinema, which is really
mhm.
exciting. I mean,
Yeah,
that's coming in light of like stuff like RRR making it to the mainstream in America, which
yeah.
is so great. So yeah, stuff like that. That's probably like the biggest Toby Hooper fan on the planet right there.
No, right on. Yeah. Yeah, he definitely had a bit of a help in the resurgence, but like it is sad. I always get sad when I think about like him and like Wes Craven being gone
Yeah.
and Romero and like it's so weird like just being because like being like a little kid and being like I grew up on these guys like doing all the horror interviews and big shout out to Mick Garris who was essentially the guy conducting a lot of these interviews,
Hmm.
like he pulled a lot of these guys in, so they're oddly they're very similar to Lucas and Spielberg to me in terms of like learning what a director is,
Hmm.
of having them sit down and not talk to me, but feel like they were talking to me in terms of talking about like, oh, well, this is how we made this movie and this is what I was going for and blah, blah, blah. And I miss their voices in the horror discussions.
I do
Um,
too. And now Mick Garris has retired his podcast post mortem,
mm.
which is a shame, but I understand. He was doing that for a very long time. Um,
Yeah, he had to have run out of guys to interview, frankly.
yeah, I think the only podcaster that's gone longer is like Mark Maron, frankly.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like the godfather of this all. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, if you're curious about Toby Hooper discussions, there's a really great one available. It's like broken up into chunks on YouTube, but Mick Garris and Toby
mm,
Hooper, Mick is interviewing him,
mm,
and really fantastic. Toby Hooper is maybe a more soft-spoken guy than
yeah.
you'd expect, considering his filmography.
Well, Mick Garris probably had the best quote about Toby Hooper I've ever heard, which I think was in the Bravo 100 Scariest Movie Moments. If you haven't seen it, he said, Toby is this really quiet, soft-spoken, self-deprecating man who is capable in thinking ways you would never dare think of. And I'm like, yeah, that seems to sum him up.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of
So,
putting it. I had the pleasure.
miss you, Toby.
Yeah,
Uh,
I miss him too. I had the pleasure of watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the big screen. The year he passed away, like relatively soon after, and let me see who was there. It was Mick Garris for
of
sure. Hang
course.
on, I'm gonna have to just cut this because I want to pull this up and properly
Yeah,
credit these
yeah, yeah.
people. Um, Don Cascarelli, Mick Garris, Tom Holland, and Adam Rifkin, and they did an
Mm,
introduction and sort of like a post mortem and a thank you to Toby Hooper for his work and
mm.
the legendary masterpiece that is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, and it was a great
And I want
print,
to
and it
give
was
a
it was it was an incredible experience.
I also want to give a brief shout out to Joe Bob Briggs, who, after Hooper passed, featured one of his movies on his last drive-in show that he does, and he took like a 20-minute block to just be like to defend Hooper being the director of Poltergeist, and was basically like it was all like all that stuff about him not directing Poltergeist was bullshit, and really went to bat for the man
That's
and
great.
really defended him. So. Um, which we should do more often, frankly.
Yeah.
You
Look,
know,
love Spielberg. He had his hand in the movie,
yes,
absolutely. But like,
it is
he's
not
got
a
enough
diss
credit.
to Spielberg. It
Yeah.
is not a diss to Spielberg, but Spielberg also produced a lot of Robert Zemeckis films, and we don't say Robert Zemeckis didn't direct fucking Back to the Future, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so get your shit together, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So R.I.P. again, Toby Hooper. We'll
Mhm.
probably talk about some of his other movies down the line, just
Yeah,
because,
hopefully,
I mean,
we'll find
some of his
more.
stuff didn't make money, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but who cares? Who cares? It's
But
the art that lasts in the long run. Definitely not the money. I know because I don't have any. But Matt, thanks for joining me.
yes, happy Halloween, everyone.
Yeah, happy Halloween. Links in the descriptions below. I'll link to this year's Hooptober too if you guys want to check it out. Go check out other people's lists and find
Yeah,
some other
if you're
stuff.
still basically if you're still in the Halloween mood post Halloween, which I've definitely been there, where sometimes my Halloween celebration starts in September and lasts until I am forced to put up a Christmas tree.
Yeah,
But uh,
yeah. I
so
would say I'm very much in the Halloween spirit this year. I got a couple family parties and such that I'm doing, and
mm,
I'm like
yeah.
I'm very excited, and I'm in the spirit, and so it'll probably go to like mid-November for me this year, and then I'll switch to Christmas because I love Christmas. So
Yeah, me and my sister have been. My sister, I got to show her Barbarian, and she went in completely blind.
holy
I
shit.
had no idea, and I didn't know she didn't know that, so I was like, "We should put this on," and then I had to play dumb for most of the movie.
Oh, that's great.
So we had a blast.
Oh, you know what? Here, that's a
Uh,
fun exercise. If you can, show someone one of those favorite scary movies of yours that has like a genre bending twist or like an unpredictable like act shift like that. Because I was
yeah,
just
yeah,
told a friend of mine got to watch From Dusk Till Dawn for the first time on the big screen, and they didn't know it was a vampire movie,
right
which
on.
is awesome. That's the way to watch that movie. So yeah, do that. Do that if you can.
I watched Psycho with people that didn't know about the shower scene.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's kind of amazing.
Oh my god. Movies are so alive.
Movies are magic.
Movies are magic.
Movie Movies are like dreams, Sammy Fableman. They'll
Yeah.
destroy your family.
Yeah, they'll destroy your family. Um the shadow of your father will be cast over you arguably for the rest of your life. Um
You literally are such a filmmaker in your soul that you will not be able to stop your filmmaking from uncovering the affair that will lead to the downfall of your family.
and also
You can't.
you will witness the downfall of your family while being unable to stop yourself from discovering the most compelling camera angles to
Way to
tell that story.
yeah, yeah, and it won't protect you either.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, you'll
Love him.
remember that the horizon's
Fableman's
most interesting on the bottom or the top.
yeah,
So,
but God is the Fableman's a good movie.
I know, fucking goddamn, I should watch that later. No, that's got to wait till like
Yeah,
November. I got to
yeah,
put
yeah,
off for spooky stuff. But again, thanks for
yeah,
listening,
yeah.
everyone. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Tune back into the regular failed fantasy blockbusters. They're all there. They're
No, this is
all gonna
kind
be
of a
there.
like. This is kind of part of it. It's like adjacent to it because it's vampires and shit.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, space
yeah.
vampires,
So
and space is not fantasy. Space is science fiction, unless you're Star Wars.
and I think what should be next? I think City of Lost Children should be the next one. From when we're recording right now. In terms of release. Uh,
I believe so. Yeah, City of
yeah.
Lost
So
Children, or maybe
or the
Legend.
other one.
I think
Uh,
Legend.
we recorded a bunch of them out of order. We were jumping around a lot,
Yeah,
so just keep an ear out. But we did. I think we did a pretty good run of episodes.
I think
So
so too.
uh,
I think day of recording is King Arthur's upload, and then
okay,
the other one for Halloween is out.
okay,
Yeah, so it's not Legend
okay.
either, but okay, so stay tuned for
All
that.
right, all right. Yeah, yeah. Keep an ear out. So um,
Yeah, all right. Goodbye, Toby Hooper. We've been professionally
goodbye,
unprofessional.
Judy Foster. Goodbye.